It's art. Let's talk about it. A podcast by the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network and sponsored by the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. And today we're joined by my really good friend, Joe Netherwood. And Joe, we appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you, Darrell. I appreciate it. It's good to have you here.
What's funny is that we go back so far. I don't think either one of us remember how long. I was a young museum director at the Pierce Museums, I think, and cutting your teeth in the Western art world, my gosh, almost 30 years ago. And it's that kind of thing that you just, some people you have in your world that are so much a part of your world that you don't even know how they became a part of your world. It's just,
Right.
You've always been there. You and Stephanie have always been there. So
Yeah, I was so happy to be able to meet you and deal with all of the great things that you were doing. And you'd asked me at one point, when did I start painting? I have a listing of all the paintings I've ever done right here on the notebook.
no kid, and that's a question. We'll get into some of the particulars of your day to day, but you keep a listing of every painting you've ever painted.
Yes.
And the first one dates back to
1992.
when you started. So the 32 years that you've been painting.
It's hard to believe.
And we'll get back to a previous career and all of that. But what was the first title?
First title was Break Time. And it was 23.5 by 28.5. And oil. I started out with oil because I wanted to have that classic look to the paintings rather than acrylic. And I gave it to friends of ours, Susan and Jeff, because I have on my listing here, date sold and buyer. And there's a whole list after that of the whole bunch of my first paintings I have retired by because I never sold those.
Isn't that funny? Well, we appreciate you being on the podcast. And the podcast is called It's Art. Let's talk about it. And I basically have the same conversation with every artist that I sit down with. We talk about art all the time. And when you sit down in front of a microphone, all of a sudden you wonder if you're going to need notes to talk about something that you do on a regular basis.
Yeah, especially when it lasts such a long period of time. And as you get older, the memories start to drift away.
They start to drift away on you,
into the ether.
On the podcast today, our good friend Joe Netherwood, Scottsdale, Phoenix-based artist, known mostly for his Western works, but some surfing scenes here of late and some things you've done. Let's talk about how you got your career started. You started in 1992 painting, but you were an illustrator.
I was an illustrator.
Artist at some point.
Yeah, freelance graphic artist and illustrator. And I was a draftsman also before that. I worked for Allied Chemical in Virginia. And because I'd taken mechanical drawing in high school. And then after I went into the service in 68, I got out and I was hoping to become an artist in the Air Force, but they didn't need any artists at that time. So I ended up being a veterinary technician because I always loved animals too. So I chose that. And I did that for a while too after I got out of the service. And it evolved eventually into me starting to do some freelance illustration work. And I met my wife to be Stephanie, on an airplane one time. I was flying from Richmond up to Philadelphia to do some work up there. And we met, and one thing led to another. We ended up getting married. And I thought Philadelphia has a better opportunity for doing illustration work than Richmond did, because it's a much bigger city and a lot more businesses and stuff. So I thought I'll move up there and we'll live there and proceed and see how things go.
Now, I know one of the things that a lot of people don't know about you. I know something about you that a lot of people don't know, and that is that you were at one point in your career a stand-up comic.
I did that. I did that.
And most people, Joe Netherwood was a stand-up comic. He's a funny guy.
I did. When we lived in Philadelphia, I started working the comedy circuit around the area there, up and down the East Coast to a certain degree. And I was in a contest at the Tropicana Hotel in Atlantic City one year. For the Tropicana Hotel had a club called Comedy Stop at the Trop. And I came in second place. Some guy named Ray Romano won first place. I don't know whatever happened to him, though. So.
You were first loser to Ray Romano.
Yeah. So, I don't feel too bad about that being said.
And I've seen photographs. We're not going to post them on our website. For those of you playing along at home, we do is put things down on our website, the photographs, paintings, a link to Joe's website, and we'll get it all there. But people playing along as they're listening to this a lot of times like to get on the laptop and actually look things up. But we won't post a picture of you doing your comedy days and it's something I've always been real proud of the fact of is you were a much larger guy back then.
Yeah. I gained a lot. I got up to, I weighed about 220 pounds at one point. And I was quite rotund, yes.
And today, if you look at Joe, he's a svelte, skinny, slender guy but you were doing comedy and doing it there in Philadelphia and doing the Trop and against Ray Romano. And but is this when you were drawing? You were still...
Yeah, I was working for Lippincott Publishing in Philadelphia as a graphic designer and illustrator. And that was my day job. And then at night, I would work in the comedy clubs around the area. And there were a lot of them back then. There was maybe 6 or 7 of them around Philadelphia and over in New Jersey. And that kept me pretty busy, I'll tell you. It was fun, though. I had a good time.
You were doing comedy, drawing, and working during the day, doing a lot of artists have those kinds of backstories, if you will. Yeah. Weren't you in a movie?
Let me think. I was, but I can't remember which one it was.
Philadelphia?
Oh, yes, that's right. I was in the movie Philadelphia with I could see him, Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah. I just had a small background part in that. I did nothing major. It was fun.
But it's fun things like that you can talk about with somebody in their life. People think that artists are just simply all they do is stand in front of an easel all day, and you've had a backstory. You and Stephanie been together for how many years now?
Oh, a good number. You'll have to ask her because she's got the number.
There's never been a Joe Netherwood in my world where there wasn't a Stephanie Netherwood. And we've talked about it on the podcast with other artists. Ron Riddick, for example, has Natalie. Andy Thomas has Dina. Charlie Russell had, and you've got Stephanie.
Thank goodness.
Because she is the backbone of the whole deal. But at what point did you decide I'm going to become a full-time early on Western artist, right?
I wasn't aware that there was a contemporary Western art market. I was aware of Remington and Russell and all the historic Western artists. And then one day I was in a bookstore and there was a magazine there. I can't remember if it was Art of the West or Western Art Magazine, but I picked it up and I went, wow, this is going on today. This looks great. I would love to try to do some of this. So I started doing work in that vein and pursuing that. And one thing led to another, and I started getting into shows with my Western art and just went on from there. And it was really quite rewarding at the time.
When did you move to Scottsdale?
We moved here in 1997.
So that was kind of your commitment.
Yeah, it was, because there's much better background for Western art in Pennsylvania, in Arizona than there is in Pennsylvania, believe me. Because there's ranches here and horses and cowboys and all kinds of good stuff. And plus all the surrounding states, New Mexico and Texas and Nevada and everything. It was just supplied so much better back to work with and other Western artists to connect with and learn from business-wise.
Cool. We're sitting here in the studio of Joe Netherwood here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Western artist. I've been taking a tour of his studio when I've been in several times. And do you have a typical art day, or did you, now that you're getting a little older and you've chosen to slow down some, but do you have a typical art day?
Usually we'll do things that we need to do early in the morning. And then
when I'm talking early in the morning, dude, I'm talking you guys get up at 4 in the morning. 4 in the morning.
And we walk for an hour and a half every day. And
explain why you're both such great shape.
Yeah, that was a good aid in losing the pounds that I get and getting down to 160. Because diet and exercise was necessary to lose all that weight. It's not something you do overnight.
But you get up at 4 in the morning, you walk for an hour and a half, and then you start your day.
That's right. And then we have breakfast, and then we proceed on with whatever we need to do that day. And sometimes I get a chance to work on art, and sometimes I don't. And in the afternoon, we do some stuff to maintain the proper mental state. We do things to help with memory, and we play card games. We do all kinds of stuff that are helpful in that area. And we generally go to bed pretty early. We usually go to bed no later than about 8 o'clock every night.
Yeah, and Jan and I kept you up till almost 11 last night. So yeah, you guys were
a special night.
you guys were very kind. Visiting the studio, Joe Netherwood on It's Art. Let's talk about it. We have to about every 5 minutes have to remind people what they're listening to. But with the artist Joe Netherwood. And Joe, how would somebody find out more about your art? JoeNetherwood.com, or what is it?
Yeah, JoeNetherwood.com is my website if you want to go in there and look, and you can see some of my work, and including, I'm not sure if we have too many of my new paintings on there. I've gone and expanded into not another area, but plus area of, I've started doing some surfing paintings, because when I was growing up in Virginia, I used to go surfing in Virginia Beach and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. My parents would go down there. We go down there on vacation and camp out at Nag's Head or Cape Hatteras. And my father built a van, and he built a rack on the side of the van that I could put my surfboard on, and we could carry it down there. And I would go out and paddle out and surf. I never got that really good at it because didn't live close enough to the ocean to go enough. But I love doing it, and I still have all my old surfing memorabilia, as you've seen in the other room there. And it inspired this new work. I thought, why not try something a little bit different? And that's what I'm doing.
Right now. One of the biggest audiences we have for these podcasts are, I don't want to say new artists, but younger artists.
Yes.
A lot of students we've converted to listening to our podcast because I try to interview people in the art world. I've interviewed some people who are fresh in the art world, like Rachel Brownlee and some other folks. But I've interviewed folks who've been in for, like you, 30, 40 years. And the people listening to this, one of the questions they're going to ask is, how have you strung together a lifetime, a career of making a living in the art world?
It takes time and a lot of effort. And I've been very lucky because my wife, Stephanie, she has a degree in accounting. And my idea of math is 2 and 2 and let me think, 5, 6. She's able to deal with a lot of the business stuff that I am not capable of doing, which I really appreciate. And then I take care of the artwork and other things.
Yeah, we've talked about Art Wife. Bill Colwick has it, Claudia. And it's just funny because I know Joe Netherwood is the artist, but if I want something done, of course, I call Stephanie. It's one of those because she's the chief pain in the butt, so to speak, with it. But so good at what she does, so very good at what she does, and so protective of Joe Netherwood and Joe Netherwood art. But what advice do you have for the young person out there listening who says, my gosh, he's had a career of this? Why have you had a career? Is it fact what you just showed me, keeping track of everything? Is it one of the things that you guys are so great at, Joe Netherwood Fine Art is so good at, is you send out lots of cards and calls and you guys keep track of people. Is that an important part of what has made you successful?
Oh, yeah, because you want to build up a collector group or potential collector group as well of people. And if you don't get yourself out there in one way or another, either doing it yourself on things you send out or doing ads or getting articles on yourself in magazines, nobody's going to know who you are, because if you're just doing local shows, that limits your exposure to people, and that can be okay. But if you really want to make a living at it, you gotta expand your exposure.
Your networking has been absolutely phenomenal. It's one of those models, if you will, of how I think a lot of artists need to. You guys never forget a birthday, never forget an anniversary, and so it's always fun to get a Christmas card from Joe Netherwood, one of the Santa Clauses in a cowboy hat kind of thing. And so we've always been excited about that. But the shows you've been in, I know of the ones you've been in, of course, the Russell show, in Great Falls, Montana, the Museum of Western Art's annual roundup, the Briscoe Night of the Artist. There's a show here in Arizona that you do every 6 weeks or so at a time. Which one is that?
I have been doing, in the past, I've been doing a 10-week long art show called, I did Celebration of Fine Art for a number of years, and then I switched over to the Arizona Fine Art Expo. And both of those are 10 weeks long, and they run about the same time every year. And they're during our high tourist periods. A lot of collectors come out and go to those shows. And they could be a real grind, though, because it's 10 weeks long, and if you want to represent yourself and show your work well, you have to be there 7 days a week. So that can really get to you. But you do get to get some work accomplished in between talking to people.
Because you pay while you're talking to people and selling work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. You can't stop painting for 10 weeks. It's necessary to use that time as best you can. Excuse me.
So you do that show and others, but a lot of your marketing has been via the internet in the last, how long? It's been a while now. You guys, Stephanie's does a great job of getting your name out there and selling works via no brick and mortar.
No, we dealt with some galleries and been in and out of them, and some work fairly well and others don't work well at all. So we find it works best for us to do it ourselves and promote ourselves and we know we're going to get the right information and the right images and stuff out there in front of the public to see. So that's why we do it ourselves.
What's your favorite subject matter? Here lately, you've been doing a lot of surf scenes.
Right now it's surfing. Yeah, that's what I'm concentrating on. I love doing people. I was a veterinary technician in the Air Force, so I love doing animals too. And just there's no one thing that I really like to do. I like several different things.
Are you a quick painter, slow painter?
I'm pretty slow, yeah. I'm precise and careful, and my backgrounds are somewhat loose, but when I get down to the details, because I think that comes from my drafting career, I'm very tight on the details. Particularly if you're portraying a cowboy, you have to portray what he's wearing correctly. Otherwise, somebody's going to call you on it who knows what he should look like. Oh, he doesn't have that kind of a gun or that kind of a branding iron.
We get that all the time at the Museum of Western Art. Yeah. They'll walk in and see a painting, and that gun wasn't even invented in 1783, whatever the day was. Yeah. And you just have to say, dude, it's art. It's art, right? Well, you pay attention to the details and take your time. And
yeah, and that's part of the fun for me. I like doing the details. And so that's how.
Are you one of those one painting at a time kind of guys?
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Yeah, I generally just have one.
And that answer varies artist to artist. I know artists who are working on, my friend Jason Skull, for example, is working on 15 sculptures at once, right? And there are painters who do the same thing, and you look over and but you do pretty much one thing at a time?
Yeah, because I like to concentrate on that piece and put everything I've got into that, because I want it to be the best that I can do. And I find by working that way, that works best for me.
One of the things that I always said early on in our career together, you and me, was I was always fascinated by the titles. You kind of have a way that you go about, you keep titles handy.
Yeah, I have a whole book of titles that I've collected over the years. And if I see something that sounds like make a great title, I write it down and keep it. Because titles can tell a story and it can take you beyond where the image takes you and describing what's going on or what else is going on at the same time in that piece. So their titles are very important.
I tell you, somebody who told me that and taught me that was the sculptor, wood carver, Gene Zesch. Gene says he's in a bar in Mexico as a kid or a young man, and he remembers somebody saying, "You look like a real cowboy." And he write that phrase down because who never knows when you're going to find the perfect piece that's going to fit to that title. And you do basically the same thing. You and Stephanie are always in search of expressions and titles. And how many works do you think you've done over your career?
Oh, probably over 300, I would think.
300 finished big works, yeah.
Tremendous. I do a lot of very precise stuff, so it takes me a while to do a piece.
Yeah.
It varies depending on what it is and how much detail work is involved in it.
Yeah. Has your palette changed over the last number of years?
No, it pretty much stayed the same.
And what is it?
Oh, gosh. I can read off the tubes of paint to you.
Are you one of those guys that goes with the real minimalist palette, or you've got 50 tubes? What?
I've got, let's see.
Over here counting his tubes on this current.
I use 12 colors.
There's 12 colors out there that he pretty much used all the time.
Yeah.
In the little studio.
So that's not too many.
For those of you who are listening along on radio, this is not television. You couldn't just see Joe get up and count the tubes at his easel. But we're sitting in a little intimate spot here in a corner of your home that we've always called the studio, Joe's studio. It's got a big easel, bullhead, or some bullhorns up above it, and books. My goodness, look at the books. And do you use a lot of reference materials, I take it?
I do, yeah. If I'm looking for a particular thing that I want to be correct in its historically, I want to make sure I get the details right, because if you're not, somebody's going to call you on it every time. They didn't wear stuff like that, but "Well, that gun wasn't made yet," or them spurs ain't right for that part of the country. You're gonna hear somebody crack on it, and usually they do it in front of a potential customer, which like kills the deal right there. So I want to make sure everything's correct, and I want them to be right when I do them.
And it looks like that's what you've become known for is you get great reference materials, a great attention to the proper detail. Is there a time period of the American West that you love to paint more than the others? Is it modern? It's not modern day cowboys as much, although I do see a lot of that.
There's a few, yeah. I've started doing a few more modern day ones. They're easier to get material from of them that I can go out on a ranch and shoot a bunch of photos and stuff. But I like the historic ones too because when you grow up watching old Western movies and TV shows, and God, there were so many of them.
Were you influenced by Gunsmoke and
Sure.
those kinds of TV shows?
Have Gun Will Travel, Wild West. God, there's so many good ones. Roy Rogers, particularly, I grew up with him. Hopalong Cassidy. Yeah, they were big heroes of mine when I was a little teeny kid. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
And in your studio, like a lot of artist studios, and I'll post pictures of this on our website, you got gear, you got chaps and hats and
yeah, stuff that I've collected. Some from cowboys have given them to me. And I got some old used saddles, and so I have some great chaps I've gotten. And I have some Native American stuff too, some war shirts, and just,
it's like any of the great artists. You go to the big studios, Ron Riddick comes to mind. He lives down in this part, has a home here and then one in Montana. And you go into their studio and like yours, you look around and my God, the stuff, the reference materials, old bugles, old powder horns, guns, rugs, that kind of stuff, I guess, is a part of living the life of a Western painter.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It helps to keep you inspired, and it gives you the vibe that you want to have when you're working on the art, and it helps you to produce stuff that feels authentic. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, we're visiting today on It's Art. Let's talk about it with Joe Netherwood, Western painter, Scottsdale, Phoenix. So you're right there on the edge. I don't ever know whether I should call you a Scottsdale artist or a Phoenix artist, but the address is one place and the location is the other because that's just the way Phoenix is laid out. But yeah, they're confused. They don't know what they're doing. Arizona artist. We go back so many years. One of my fondest memories is when I was director of the Briscoe Museum. You wanted to show me some stuff, and I was out here for the Cowboy Artist of America exhibition, and you and I had known each other, but we had not really developed a lasting friendship yet. And I remember you wanted to show me some work, and we had a little dumpster show. You remember
Yes, I'm afraid I do.
It was one of those, and it was partly Stephanie and her insistence that the director of the Briscoe look at, or director of the Pierce. I guess I was still at the Pierce Museum. That the director of the Pierce look at some of your work. And as a museum director, I get it all the time. I get 200 portfolios a year. People want me to see their art, want me to look at their art. And I appreciate that. And I'm honored, but if they think my opinion of the arts is worth anything. But I said, I'll be glad to look at your work. I happen to have some here. We started taking it out of the trunk of your car, out of that van or something, and laid it up next to a dumpster there in a hotel parking lot. I just thought
that was the first venue of showing my work to a museum director. So I thought that was apropos at the time.
But it worked. The Pierce Museum ended up acquiring several of your works.
Yeah.
I think now they've got 2 or 3 in the Pierce Museums. The other art shows, we're working on one right now for the Museum of Western Arts. You can find the right one for that collection. But I guess my point being is you hustled. You and Stephanie have worked hard.
You got to, yeah. Yeah, it's like every business, the amount of work you put into promotion and beyond your ability to do what you're doing is important in finding a place and a niche in the whole web work of the business. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be flailing around and wasting your time, basically.
People can find your work at joenetherwood.com. Just joenetherwood.com. And of course, we'll post things on the bottom of our website and make sure people know how to get to your work. But I don't want to say I like to get out advice from the old guys, but you've been in this game a long time. Is it muscle memory? New artists need to draw paint, or what is it? What's that person out there? Give it that one little piece of advice to that new and upcoming artist who's listening to Joe Netherwood on this podcast?
Yeah, I think it is muscle memory. I think the more you draw and the more you paint, the better you get at it. And you have to pay attention to what you're doing and try to improve and compare it to others and look at it and yours and go, what are they doing that I'm not doing? If you like a particular artist's work, you study their work. And why not be the best that you absolutely can? Life is short. As I found entering my 75th year this year, which I can't believe.
Yeah, because we were both under 40 or under 50 when we met.
Yeah. I don't know how the heck that happened, but anyway, I've enjoyed doing what I'm doing, meeting people like you who have been so wonderful and helpful in my career. Just get out there and do what you want, but make sure you have enough to buy bread and cookies for the kids. So
it's a business, and I hear that more. I talk to artists. Not only is it an art form, the word starving artist is so popular, but it doesn't have to be because it's a business. And if you treat a business like a business should be treated,
absolutely.
I will make a note to those of you listening along, a disclosure. I am a collector of Joe Netherwood art and proud to have hang works by Joe in my office and my home. And if you have a chance to acquire a Joe Netherwood, and these surf scenes are cool. They're different.
They are different. They're different. Whole different color scheme and imagery and movement. It's exciting, but it makes it fun to do. And it's always fun to have something fun to do.
Do you get tired of cowboys?
No, not really. I just pursuing something a little just different for a while. I'll still do Western things.
I say cowboys and Indians because you're quite known for a lot of your Indian.
Oh yeah, I've got a cowboy on my easel right now that I just started a couple of days ago. I'm doing that because I'm going to be submitting it to a show, and I like to keep a variety of work going. It keeps you versatile and loosened up and everything, and it's a good way to do it.
75 years.
Good God.
A good bit of that as a professional artist and known worldwide as one of the great guys in the Western art world.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you including me in on your podcast.
It's Art. Let's Talk About It is a production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network, an award-winning podcast. Last year, we won an award of distinction at the Big Nawa. There's bunch of initials there. I don't remember which, but a big board. Got a little Emmy-looking like statue that we have there at the museum, and real excited about that. The podcast is listened to by just thousands of people, which always surprises me. People come up to me and say, "Hey, you're the guy with the podcast with that. It's Art. Let's talk about it." And so we appreciate Joe, you being on the podcast for us today. And see, that wasn't too difficult.
No, I appreciate you asking me. It was fun. You made it that way.
As for those of you who want to play along, of course, the link's at the bottom of the website, joenetherwood.com. And of course, I'll post some pictures that taken here in the studio, and there's pictures of me and Joe, and you can always go out and look at all of that. And we encourage you to become a collector of Joe Netherwood's fine art.
That's a great idea. Y'all should go right out and do that right away.
One of the running jokes, Joe, we've told over the years, every time I call, you answer the phone and I'll say, I'll take two. I want two of everything. Give me two of everything. It's if it were only right.
Absolutely.
If it were only
certainly keep me busy.
But Joe, we appreciate you being on It's Art. Let's talk about it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it too.
Thanks. Wasn't too bad, was it?
No, it was great. Great.
It was funny. I said I don't have many artists I talk to, and you ask them to be on a podcast and they freeze up. They can't do it.
Yeah, people are geeky about it.
My friend Bill Colwick said the other day we were doing a podcast for him, and he said, "Do I need to take some notes or write some notes down ahead of time?" Dude, we're just going to talk about art. It's our elevator speech. What we've done for, 30 years or longer. Some of us have been doing this for a long time. And I've got some artists I've been asking for now for a year to be on my podcast, and they just won't do it. They don't want to talk about it. Something that they do and they talk about on a regular basis. But anyway, appreciate the time.
They feel pressured. I understand that.
I'm gonna take some pictures and do that. And so.